Hello, everybody, and welcome to the fourth interview with my guest and friend, Scott Mandelker. And today, we'd like to cover divination, actually. And kind of before the show, we were talking about the I Ching. Actually, we wanted to start the show with the I Ching. And I mean, in the last show, we talked about the tarot, but I thought it'd be good for us to talk a little bit about divination and seeking higher guidance from, higher sources, so to speak. So that's the topic for today's show. Scott, welcome.
Thank you for having me again.
So, Scott, what is divination?
Mm. Well, first of all, I'm not, an expert on the I Ching, and divination is not something that I've done a lot of, although I've used the I Ching pretty consistently up until a few years ago, from the year 1987 or so.
Mm-hmm.
So about 25 years and 20 plus years. Divination, is really seeking divine assistance, very simply. Often it's simplistic in that, should I do this or should I do that? Is it a yes or is it a no? Where's the water? Where's the oil? What, tell me my future, tell me my fortune. But then there's also seeking spiritual assistance, and for truly internal transformation, which you could use the I Ching for that, and you can use tarot, many other things. So it's the whole subject of interdimensional calling. And Ra said that what distinguishes them from the negative side, or the Orion group, is that the Confederation waits for the calling. And
so when you say calling, you mean it's basically communication, isn't it? From different densities.
Well, in this case, calling means seeking.
Okay.
It's asking. Calling in the sense of, like we would call a friend, that call is a request.
Right.
And the request could be, pure or impure, meaning for the benefit of all or selfish. It can be positive or negative. Their negative entities call also. They call for spirits that can help them know the future, to make money or gain power, or they call for power and ability. So it's the point about seek and you will find. Knock and it will be answered. And that's a law. And so there are higher beings watching us, with us, actually always, all the time. How much they can do very much more depends on us than them. Depends, what you're asking and what level that may be sourced from, meaning, let's say I have a difficult situation in my life, and I want to know what's the goal in terms of learning and personal transformation. That's the ultimate cause of my having created this catalyst. Right? So everything. Why do I have these parents? Let's say, start at the beginning. Well, there are particular reasons why we chose parents, and that would be known fully by higher self, and that can be accessed by guides or higher dimensional helpers. There are many, of course, and so that's very complicated. People call for, Jesus, help me, and they get some help, perhaps. It's not necessarily Jesus or the historical figure the person thinks they're calling. Same thing with Ra. Akhenaten was not calling for some sixth density group from Venus. He was actually calling for universal confirmation and guidance about his understanding of unity.
Right. It's like the man in the street and he gets mugged and then he cries out help. So, he's not fussy about help, is he?
Yeah. Well, we may be fussy about the help that I want to be. People are a little bit silly about this in terms of channeling. Some people say, I want to be channeling the angels. And then somebody says, oh, no, I want to channel the dolphins. And tonight we'll be doing channeling from the dolphins and the angels and the elephant kingdom. Wow, oh, wow. But actually, really, people are like that. Uh, but actually, uh, the messages from the other side are both general and specific. The general ones are known by any positive helper, like the law of karma. Why did this trouble come to me? Well, perhaps it's related to the trouble that you've been giving the people around you.
Mm.
But then deeper questions would have to be sourced from a higher level. So why did I choose my parents? Well, you'd have to understand their psychology and your own psychology and your own point in soul evolution and what's blocked and what could be released, what blockage, what patterns of mind represent energy blockages, second, third chakra. What's the meaning of this illness? Well, in a way, it's an interesting thing. And this is what I see. The degree to which the person has developed their conscious mind understanding is related to the completeness or the thoroughness of the information presented. And so if you can't conceive of it, you may not get that information. And so it's very exacting, actually. The Confederation, Ra was talking about the use of mantras, and that using certain mantras are like dialing a certain telephone number. And this is true. The common mantras that we use, Om Mani Padme Hum or something like that, from Tibetan Buddhism, are also working that way, but a little less specific. So black magic and occultists, they have their own mantras or ritual incantations, invocations to get certain spirits, which are negative.
Yep.
And those can be also very exact. Usually they are. And so what you get depends on who you are and how you call. Some calls, like those mantras, are extremely exact, so that if you know the precise pronunciation, which is not easy, and it's the intonation, and it's very specific. If you would know that, you would get some entity immediately. It would just appear in front of you. And
so it has to be exact. It's not even the intent that when you say it.
Well, it's first of all, I'm just talking about the use of very specific incantations to bring down spirits. This is nothing I would do, but there's specificity, and then there's the general rule. The general rule is that certain states of consciousness and certain sounds have effect at certain levels or dimensions in the non-physical. And so, on the one hand, you can, by the use of a very particular mantra, intoned exactly in the original way, which is all hidden these days. That's even the Brahmins of India. They don't they don't even pronounce exactly the way it used to be, or sometimes they veil it. So there's the use of very specific calling mechanisms, like that kind of a mantra or invocation, that are actually kind of by necessity or by law demand response or require response from sometimes even a particular entity.
Wow.
But that's not really the common use of divination. Divination normally proceeds by a certain need and then a certain quality of calling. And you get what you call for depending on who you are, how you've developed yourself. And so if you've developed yourself by a lot of study, then you can actually make sense of more information.
Yeah.
And if the conscious mind has not been developed, you won't get necessarily information that that goes into certain detail.
Mm.
It's very complicated. And then there are positive and negative entities. And so to the extent that there's selfishness in the calling, then positive entities won't have a part of it.
Mm.
Or the contact is mixed. It's a mixed contact. So it's interestingly, actually, I just read the other day, Ra was commenting on a question from Don about the Billy Meyer contact, the Palladian contact with Billy Meyer, the Swiss farmer and
Mm-hmm.
fellow. And Ra sort of indicated, first of all, that they didn't want to talk about it, which means there's something going on there.
Mm.
And then they insinuated that it was a mixed contact, meaning positive and negative both responded to his calling.
Mm.
How much of either, I don't know. From who, I don't know. But again, you can determine that by the quality or the nature of the material. So if the calling, it's a question of the degree of polarity, the quality of polarity in the calling. If I'm simply calling for help, there's nothing negative in it, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But the calling may be asked in a mature way by one who's done a lot of work on themselves, or an immature way by somebody who hasn't done a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
Work in wisdom, and work in development of love and kindness, loving kindness. And so, how much the person has cleared their own blockages becomes the purity of the calling, in that they're clearly on the positive path.
Mm.
And so whatever they get, they'll be using for their own benefit in a holistic way,
So,
benefiting.
so someone who is not polarized to either, you know, fully service to others or fully service. I mean, in that spectrum, someone who's quite mixed would get a mixed response.
Um, depending on, well, it depends then on the quality of that specific call, or the
Right.
nature of the call and the quality of the caller.
Right.
So a person who's not polarized is a person who hasn't done so much work on self-development. That's what it means
Mm.
to be not polarized, because the
Mm.
people who are polarized or clearly on a path of virtue or a path of vice
Mm.
have done work to get there.
Yeah.
They're there because they got there by effort.
Mm.
And the effort was unidirectional, meaning one direction or the other, positive or negative, unity or separation.
Yeah.
So that constitutes the nature of the caller. In terms of the quality of the calling, the person who hasn't done a lot of work is normally asking for release from pain or some material benefit. Like here in Taiwan, people day in and day out go to temples with incense and flowers and candles and offerings, perhaps,
Mm.
asking for benefit.
Yeah. Good
And
exam results usually.
what's that?
Good exam results.
Yeah, right. Help my son pass his college exam.
Mm.
Help my daughter get pregnant. Help my husband, harvest without backache.
Mm.
All sorts of things. Those callings are not particularly positive or negative.
Mm.
They're somewhat negative in that there's a selfishness, but it's not that heavy. So it's pretty much non-polarized.
Mm.
Then it really, again, depends on their karma. You see, the limit, so there are multiple limits or filters that determine the effect of calling. One is, of course, the nature of the caller, which is the degree to which they're polarized, positive or negative, which is the degree to which they've done inner work, which is the degree to which they've cleared lower chakra blockages.
Mm.
So that is the nature of the caller. And a very positive person, positive in the sense of having done a lot of work in love wisdom, will have a different responding crew, a different crew, a different level of beings that are normally responsive.
Right.
While the person who's done little work has a more general response and responding community, a community of responders. It's
Would
very
you
strange.
would you say that a positive asking response is responded usually by, well, what I'm trying to say is it because looking at the cosmic evolutionary chain, would it be more natural for more higher beings of light to respond than higher beings of the dark side? Because as we know in the fifth, the negatively oriented entities cease to give a shit. You know what I mean? Whereas
Well,
in the five
yeah.
and the six light, they would still help.
Okay, let me refine that, I think. Ra mentioned that there are very few 5D negative members of Orion because they no longer find virtue in other selves. They no longer find any value in other selves. There's no longer any benefit perceived by them in the act of control of other selves, including planets and groups. So universal empire building is seen as delusion by them because they understand that there's no outer and inner split. And the purpose of working on the outer is only the transformation of the inner. The purpose of, in this case, service to self, upper 4D negative or 4D negative, and Illuminati, same. When they're so busy working on controlling society and individuals and devising strategies to keep that going, they're under the presumption that self and other are two. And they're under the presumption that they benefit by outer manipulation. The benefit that comes to them, which would be continued on the negative, their continuance on the negative path, is actually the effect that their working on others has on themselves. By their energy and effort towards clever scheming and clever use of their resources and manipulative stratagems and force application, they are transforming themselves. They are basically working from a maintained second, third, fourth chakra blockages to activated fifth and sixth. Wisdom, the negative use of wisdom. Wisdom can be used positive and negative. And also pure will, which is intelligent energy or sixth chakra activation, 6 and 7 linkage. So the true effect of any outer working, including service to other, by the way, is its effect on chakra transformation, the development of body, mind, spirit. So same for the positive. So we spend time, like here, I spend time talking, and that talking has some benefit to others.
Yeah. The
value of that, for me, is how it transforms my own body, mind, spirit complex. The reason that service to other is beneficial for those on the positive path is because it's the most efficient, one of the most efficient means to self-transformation. So the triad is study, meditation, and service. And the value of working with other in the positive way, including making organizations that help the earth or take care of poverty or injustice or anything, or taking care of old people in the hospital, or help the trees or help the animals or whatever form of service to other there may be. The reason the person is there is because they're practicing self-transformation by the catalyst of relationship. Now, 5D, upper 5D or 5D negative realizes that there's no outer and inner. It's all one. It's all available by the inner. And so there's no need to pretend that that outer work has some special value, because it's all inner work. It's all inner work. And that's exactly the same in upper levels of the positive path, like meditation. I mean, the Buddha, his primary teaching was not go out and save people. His primary teaching was, this is the path to freedom, and this is what you'd need to do if you're going to follow it. And if you follow it, then go off and do your thing, meaning do it. And they did help the community by teaching, but that was much less important, actually, in terms of the purpose of the Buddha's speaking.
Do you think a Mahayana Buddhist would disagree with that?
Yes, of course, because of Mahayana. Mahayana came later, and they basically lowered the goalpost, which was appropriate given the fact that that Arhat was considered too far from where most people were coming into the Sangha.
I see. Okay.
And that's they've been lowering the goalposts ever since Gautama died. So not they Mahayana, but Buddhism in general. Somebody was talking to me about this the other day, and if your student is not more achieved than you as a teacher, then you've failed. The only teacher that really is successful is the one who generates students who are superior to him or her.
Wow.
Because only by that the tradition is enhanced rather than degraded over time.
Wow.
And that didn't happen, of course. And so Mahayana made the ideal bodhisattva, actually, instead of Buddha or Arhat. In fact, they put down the Arhats as being selfish or something, which was totally infantile thinking. But as if the Arhat is achieving enlightenment for self, when there's no self. There's no self to be benefited. But when the person becomes Arahant, they become a universal force for good, for the benefit of all evolution. So, and simply the radiatory effect of their doing practice is powerful too. Mahayanists didn't seem to understand that. So the quality then of the calling of somebody who's done more work is itself more powerful. And so it very much depends on, as I said, the nature of the caller, which in essence, after we boil down what evolution means, in many ways, in terms of mind, it's the ability to focus and apply the will in a focused way. A focused calling is very different than a general calling. You know, somebody falls down and they go, help! This is very general. Versus, please help me understand the nature of my parents that's related to some inner blockage that I need to release. Then again, you see, the more the person has prepared themselves by study for the calling, the more precise the information can be. And it may not be like I hear somebody talking in my ear, but there's the insight.
Yeah. Insight
comes, which is not the same as vipassana insight, which is not by receiving somebody else's guidance in meditation. It's the mind opening for a moment of illumination.
And they're completely different things, are they?
Yeah, well, insight in vipassana is basically a moment of the cessation of ignorance. It's moments of clear seeing, what Ra would call potentiation of spirit.
Right.
And the tower or the lightning that comes down and brings daylight to darkness. It's a clear seeing of the nature of mind.
Wow.
Which is beyond thinking. If it's knowing as opposed to thinking.
Right.
So anybody can say there's no self, or self is empty of solidity, of substantiality. That there's no ego, there's no solid self, even though there's presence. Right. You can say there's a sense of self for sure, and then there's a presence, which has a quality of sentience or sensitivity or consciousness, which seems like a personal identity. but that doesn't mean there's a solid self. But those words mean the most to somebody who's had the experience. And if somebody didn't have the experience, those words are just words for most people.
Yeah.
And so that's the difference between insight that leads to gnosis or knowing versus intellectual remembrance or intellectual thinking without a moment of revelation. But that revelation is not determined by a calling for something from another entity, which is divination.
So gnosis is equivalent to Vipassana's insight?
In my understanding, yes.
Wow.
Of course.
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, gnosis, Gnosis, is, the root of the Gnostic group, which really means the knower, Knower, the knowers. The Gnostics are knowers, those who know. And what they know is basically the result of illumination. They're, opening the third eye, actually. It's a direct perception of multidimensional reality, or the nature of all form as emptiness, or the nature of all form as dancing light, Brahmanet. And it's a penetration beyond of into reality beyond thinking and beyond the continuity of a sense of self. So there's actually, it's a moment of transcending the belief in selfhood,
right?
Because reality is non-dual.
I want to ask you about going back to divination. Now we can obviously flip a coin or consult the I Ching, which is, obviously in terms of complexity, the I Ching is much more complex. So would that give a better resolution in terms of the answer? I mean, what I'm saying? Is flipping a coin a system of divination, first of all?
Yes, absolutely.
So would entities kind of influence that for you?
Again, it depends on who you are.
Right.
If you've done a bunch of work in study and meditation and service to other, you have a community. You have a community of responders. You have a higher consortium of beings who are your helpers, and they're always there, or they assign themselves to you, and they watch out, and they help facilitate what you need.
Right.
Now, within the limits of karma, right? They can't make something happen. If you need to go through hard times, they won't stop it, for sure. However, they'll be there for comfort and assistance and understanding, which is making peace with or knowing its nature, which is a form of spiritual mental comfort, actually higher comforting by understanding the significance of the hardship. So if the person is sincere in the calling, even if they haven't done a lot of self-development, but they're focused, they focus their will on the single desire to be helped by an answer, by the coin toss, it's more likely they'll get some help. But again, it depends on what it's about. If you say, should I do this stock or should I do that stock? Should I buy this or buy that? Because that's purely service to self, or at least not of any benefit to others, unless the plan is I'm going to use the money to help others, it's less likely you'll get any kind of clear response. And you can also get people playing with it, or entities on the other side that are negative or that are tricky, who will mess up the response. Right. But for sure, I mean, I've done it many times, with serious mind and focus and sincerity and a coin, and a question that's important and not trivial, because it meets a real authentic need, a heart need, not simply material desire, a heart need. in that case, absolutely, coin toss can be quite accurate.
But what if the entity wants to say maybe instead of yes or no? Then, you know what I mean?
Well, you see, then you get very subtle because actually I remember I've used the I Ching since 77, not 87. So I was 15 when I started. So, but I haven't used it so much recently. You make a relationship with the entities that are associated with the divination tool.
Right.
Now, some tools like tarot or I Ching have a certain history that's deeper and different than other tools. So, Ouija board is considered an unprotected medium in that it's quite available for negative entities and lower astral forms to play through it. So it's actually dangerous.
Right.
Many people have had trouble with it. Meanwhile, the I Ching has a history of very sincere calling. And there are angels or there are entities associated with that, as well as tarot, who are available to respond. And so, can you ask your question again? I think
I
read over it.
I guess I was, yeah, no, you know, I mean, I was just asking from a viewpoint of the subtlety. Yeah, I mean, as you said, you know, I think it's kind of quite rhetorical.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to make sure that, you know, obviously.
What if they want to say maybe? You asked.
Yeah, exactly. Or
well, you see, this is
yeah.
Or what?
As in, would they answer that in the first place? You know what I mean? Like, let's say you're asking a really, and also I guess it's to do with the vibration of the calling, and to me it feels like someone who is sincere would use something more advanced than just flipping a coin. You know what I mean?
Yes, in general that's true, but somebody who's sincere may have only a coin at hand.
Right.
And so that's all that's available, and for some reason there's a sense that I want to offer it up to a higher power, and you decide.
Well, of course, I mean, we have to ask you, is divination even necessary? I mean, why can't we just tune in and get it from the mind itself?
You surely can. And I was just talking to somebody today, and we're talking about how little people really understand, meaning people read things and go to seminars, but if you ask them specific questions, they actually have a hard time explaining. You know, like, what's the nature of higher self? What's the nature of karma? What's the nature of third chakra activation? They have no idea, actually. They can't hardly answer. So what's been going on? Yes, a person who's more advanced would use a more advanced medium. What happens is, and as you say, it's not only the caller, but it's the nature of the calling. But a sincere calling gets a sincere response in general. But when the quality of the calling goes out of sincerity or out of genuine need, or goes into materialistic greed or something like that, if you haven't lost the positive contact, which will happen at some point, the response then is in reference to the nature of the distortion of the caller. So this happened with me with I Ching many times. I would ask once and get an answer, and I didn't really like the answer, or there's a difference between not liking the answer and wanting another answer versus not understanding the answer.
Right.
However, there's a sincere not understanding of an answer, and then there's a neediness in not understanding. So one could be saying, I don't understand, tell me again. And that can be very sincere. That can also be distorted by some unwillingness to take the ball and run with it.
Yeah.
I want you to keep talking to me, even though you gave me the answer already.
Yeah.
I don't quite understand, but I don't actually want to think about it. So yes, people could find all the answers by just internal thinking. And the phrase there is, if you have a question, ask yourself. And that's absolutely true. Every answer could be done internally.
Yeah.
On the other hand, there are helpers. But what happens is, if the person is sincere and uses the medium carefully, then a relationship is built up with the community of responders, meaning the angels and other entities that are associated with that on the inner planes, on the astral plane, from which guidance comes, at best. But again, Ouija board is not part of that because it's sort of given over to the left side of the community, to the negatives or to demented spirits on the left side. But something like I Ching has its own community of entities that are available. But if the question, if the person, it depends again on the nature. It's like a relationship with your teacher. In the beginning, the teacher doesn't really know you, or you're just another person in the crowd, generally. And they await your efforts. If you then make significant efforts, then you become more important because they can help you more. Right. And you're using what's being offered.
Right.
In that case, then the response or the guidance can be much more specific, and the teacher has more leeway in how they handle you. So, I mean, I've been chastised by the I Ching many times, because I knew better, and I shouldn't have been. I really knew better than to be asking that question, or I wasn't using the previous response that I didn't understand and I didn't make efforts to understand.
And is this hexagram 4 that you're saying?
Youthful folly is one of them, but there are other ways of being chastised. There are many other moving lines and other hexagrams that are chastising. So yes, of course, I got number 4 often, but I mean, I've been using it for 30 years. So,
what's your take on these? There's a lot of stuff that's coming out these days with like, Doreen Virtue's angel cards. I mean, are these systems of divination that are worth checking out?
Those have no interest for me, so they're not. I don't find them worth checking out, but because I have what I need.
Right.
When you have something you need, there's no need to keep running around for the same thing.
Okay.
Because ultimately, truth is truth, and however you get it is not as important as getting it and using it. And so the newer systems basically have their own groups, but I think it's a little bit more general. The problem, meaning there are angels or higher beings who are assigned to or related to some of the newer decks, perhaps, but they don't need that. It hasn't been around long enough. And the real question is, how well do you understand the meaning of the cards that you're getting? You have to actually understand. It's like if you want to know I Ching, you really have to know all 64 hexagrams. And you really have to have familiarity with the moving lines of each of them. So that, it's hexagram 39, moving line 3. Ah, yeah, I remember this. And you remember when you got it before. I would remember, and I would think, okay, it's related to that. Ah, yes, it's like that.
Wow.
And that gives a lot of explanation. With the newer decks, people are not. They're not studying the deck, and the decks don't even deserve it normally because there's no systematization. There's no systemizing of the significance of those positions, the number of cards in the deck. So like the Ra's Tarot, the first 22 major arcana, each one is quite distinct, and they have a relation to the cards before and after. They have a relation to other cards in the 22, and the meanings are not vague at all. And in a lot of the newer decks, the meanings are very vague. It's like my angel message for the day. that message is just a general message normally about love and wisdom, which is fine. But the person you have to know, again, the more you put in, the more you get out. If you want an easy, you can't buy enlightenment, and you can't buy freedom, and you can't buy wisdom, and you can't buy love. And so the more you put in, the more you'll get out. And if you put in a little, you'll get out a little too.
Well, I guess it's, again, this is parallel to lowering the goalposts, isn't it? I mean, Doreen Virtue's angel cards, I mean, just taking an example, would cater to a much larger audience than the Ching. And in many senses, that's positive, right?
Sure. Well, if people are helped, they're helped. Help is good. Love, light is good. So it's a matter of each person getting what they need. But again, some people need less than others, and because they're seeking, it's a matter of the quality of the calling or the seeking.
Right.
The more you make effort in study, meditation, and service, the better your divination will be. Period. Because having made the efforts in study, meditation, and service, you prove to the universe that you're serious about your own transformation in the way of benefit to all. And then, of course, higher beings would like to help more. They want to help. Meanwhile, a person who has a very shallow approach to study and uses a deck that they don't really understand, and they're not, they're not serious about it. They're just curious, and they're just trying to enjoy and get a happy feeling in the moment, actually, or some little reassurance. Then what they get is little too.
Well, I was going to ask, is there any advantage to divination as opposed to direct intuitive insight?
Your questions are great. Yes and no. It's a funny thing. There are many divination junkies. I remember I was in the forest of southern Thailand at the tender age of 21 or so, and I was living in a wood hut on stilts, and I had my I Ching from America, and I still have the blue and orange and red mold spores on the inside cover of the book, because it was a hot place and mold spores fly freely in the forest, in the jungle. And I remember I met some guy who also had that, and he was asking 3 or 4 times a day about this. If you're asking 3 or 4 times a day, you're really going in circles, and they will keep you in circles, because you need to get out of that before you can get anything useful. And you can get one answer that goes one way, and the next answer seems to be contradicting it, and it's all saying you're not looking at something. You're not looking in the mirror, bub. You need to think about this for yourself and stop asking us. So people can become attached to asking. On the other hand, there are cases where you've made efforts and you hit a dead wall. You hit a dead end, and the person sincerely wants more help and has done work in trying to find answers, and they have some answers, but they want to go further. In general, call and you'll find. That's the way. To the extent that the person becomes dependent on divination, then they're simultaneously nurturing low self-value. They're simultaneously strengthening the distortion of second chakra blockage of low self-value, low self-worth.
It's needing crutches.
Thinking that I can't do it myself when you can. And this is actually one of the reasons, this is just what I was talking to my friend about at lunch, this is one of the reasons that people can't articulate their understanding, because they listened, but they didn't integrate by reflection what they were hearing. They heard all sorts of teachings from all the seminars and the books they read, but they didn't work with the ideas internally to develop understanding, to reflect, see how the ideas explain their own life, see other levels of the idea, its relation to other things that they already know, inner work of thinking. It's thinking, actually, and making association and putting things together. This, if not done, leads the person to not really know. And then they may be thinking, oh, I'll keep asking divination to give me. But the person is not using the catalyst. They're not using the information they received already.
Right.
So,
I guess at the same time, spirit could use divination as just a form to give us insight or to give us a message in maybe circumstances that we cannot receive it directly.
Sure, that happens all the time, and often that's called synchronicity. And people have it by dreams. Meanwhile, some people are so busy interpreting their dreams that they get turned around by themselves, and they actually they get into a certain tape loop. This happens with some people who record their dreams, where there's an unconscious desire for continued complex imagery or continued complex narrative. And the mind then, the deep mind is fulfilling the unconscious request for quantity rather than quality. And the person is loaded down then with dream imagery, some of which has no importance at all. And they keep getting more and more every day, and they're not using it. And then they get tangled up, and the dreams are off. But synchronicity is a way of delivering messages. It's usually in response to an unconscious call, or a call in relation to higher self. The higher self, unconsciously we want our growth. Unconsciously, we're seeking to be free from some blockage or to find an answer. Higher self, recognizing that, basically okays the decision, or makes okays the request from an inner source, from a guide or an angel, to provide some information or to help us. To be given some inspiration. And the person doesn't know why they got it, because they weren't asking for it, but at a deep level they are asking and they can use it. So that's like, I'm wondering about something and then I hear a noise and I turn my head and I see a number. Like today I'm eating sushi and I'm talking to her about something, and then thinking about actually expansion of consciousness, and I look over and there's 8, the number 8, because that's like booth number 8 at the sushi bar. Right. So, but 8 is, infinity symbol, and 8 has a certain meaning to me also. Yeah. And so that kind of thing, which certainly can mean nothing, also can mean something, and as some kind of confirmation. So synchronicity is surely a form of message transmission from higher planes that in many ways actually is a response to calling, but the calling is unconscious often.
Would you say that the higher self is the gatekeeper for all of these things?
Gatekeeper is probably not the best term, but
like a filter.
Higher self is like your own personal master. Higher self is you as your own master. Your true teacher, your true North Star, which is you, or your greater being, that then has a deeper relationship with you as you develop yourself, as basically, lower chakras are cleared and the higher 3, 4, 5, 6 are well developed. As that happens, higher self plays more of a role in the daily life or in the incarnation. It's not necessarily even in the daily life, but in the flow from phase to phase of one's life. So there are cycles of an incarnation, not only the 7-year cycles of, being born to becoming older, which relate to the cellular regeneration or cellular transformation in 7 years, and chakras. But not only that, but significance of development of particular aspects of mind, actually. And so particular aspects of mind are developed in phases throughout an incarnation, depending on the work that's done. And the more work one does, the faster the lessons can come, or the greater the inspiration and the greater the higher self influence and input. And, many people have had the experience of requesting more catalyst for faster growth. And then some heavy thing happens to them soon.
Yeah, yeah.
And so higher self mediates, yes, in many ways, higher self is mediating certain flow of light from higher dimensions into the incarnate body, mind, spirit of the person. That's true.
I wanted
It's
to
very
ask.
subtle.
I wanted to ask you about drugs. Some people obviously take marijuana and ayahuasca and all these hallucinogenics to get information. Would you say that's a parallel to divination?
Yeah, it's a parallel to many things. It can be a parallel to contemplation meditation. Meaning, again, it's a matter of the intention and the one who's using. And so the Buddhist phrase, Buddhist saying from China in terms of teachers and students, when a snake drinks water, it turns to poison. When the cow drinks water, it turns to milk. And so the same substance,
Wow,
the same
that's a great
experience.
saying. Yeah,
Yeah, isn't that good?
It's beautiful. Yeah,
right. So starting with water, one becomes poison and one becomes milk, based on the nature of the one who's using it, using the material, using the teaching. And so drugs, depend on the person and their intentions. And intentions are not only conscious, of course, they're also unconscious, which means where you're really coming from. So there are people who would use every day to avoid a certain emotional experience and the insight or self-reflection associated with repressed emotional conflict. And then there are people who would be using sometimes or often, I don't know, who have a ritual approach to it or a ceremonial approach. So meditation, marijuana could be used in psychotherapy. It has been, like LSD has been. It can be used in meditation, although that's sort of a mixed bag. And I'm not sure I recommend that. But it can be used according to the purity of the user's understanding of his intentions. And so many are the crutches we all use. Meanwhile, in fact, every substance is a crutch, for sure.
Yes.
The person who wants no crutch basically eats once or twice a day, and the rest of the time is study and meditation. Rest. And helping whoever they're with, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Nothing much more.
Yeah.
So there are lots of crutches.
Yeah.
But certain then drugs are different than other drugs. There are people who take LSD and go to the rock and roll concert. And then there are people who take that and go into a sensory deprivation tank so as to explore nature of their mind.
Mm.
So there's shamanic use of peyote,
Mm.
and then there are people who just want to get stoned.
Mm.
So, uh, meanwhile, then there are other drugs like cocaine or heroin or crack or poppers or downers or speed, where there isn't a hell of a lot of consciousness expansion use possible,
Mm.
I think. And the people who are using them don't think that way either. So,
Yeah, like attracts like, isn't it?
like a what?
Like attracts like.
Yes, 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 very much so. And
Mm.
so people sniff glue because they're poor and they want
Mm.
to get high. In
Yeah.
third world countries, it's not unusual.
Mm.
And other people trust pharmaceuticals and they take downers,
Yeah.
or they like to get high, so they take crystal meth or something. Uh, Drugs that hurt the body would be less likely to help the mind,
Mm.
right? Uh, but again, it depends. Uh, People take many great poets have written from opium, Baudelaire, right?
Mm.
So the tradition, I mean, Freud was a cocaine addict, or one of these guys. There's something called laudanum. I don't know if
Mm.
it's opium or coca, but in the 19th century, there was a lot of drug use among artists
Mm.
in Europe
Mm.
and writers, and some of those guys were brilliant.
Yeah.
So Jimmy Page, right? One of the best guitarists in the world
Mm.
and a real magician. Uh, Now he blew himself out from too much drugs, but I'm sure his best performances were he was using something. He used
Mm.
all sorts of things, I think. Now it kind of wrecked him. But uh, it can be those certain drugs used in a certain way, with a very clear understanding of one's motives,
Mm.
can surely open channels and then be used for information
Yeah.
and deeper self understanding, both.
Yeah. Actually, this is a very personal question because I do use some marijuana from time to time, and when I use it, I usually I surf the internet for research and information, and to kind of look at material which I can't penetrate normally. Like the other day, I used some, I smoked some vaporizer, and I look at the Bhagavad Gita, and I was just looking at things which I was like, wow, I've never realized this before. And I mean, I have to say that obviously I came from a very drug negative background, but I came to see, I guess, that marijuana has a lot of tremendous potential. So yeah, that's where I'm at. But I mean, in a way, in many ways, I've also learned many lessons from it. Checking that I'm not psychologically addicted to this thing, and making sure that that there's space. I'm doing it in a structured way. I'm doing it
Mm.
in a sensible way. Always checking my sanity. Always checking that I'm not using it as a crutch. And it's funny because I consulted the I Ching on this, on the use of marijuana,
Uh-huh.
and surprisingly, the I Ching came out very positive on
What was
the.
the hexagram? Did you one hexagram or moving lines and two? Do
I have it saved.
you remember the number? Which one it was?
Let me.
We
Yeah,
can look at it together.
I have it saved. One sec.
Yeah, it's actually interesting to go over
Uh,
the I Ching together even a little bit, because the meanings are very subtle in many cases.
yeah, I'm just okay. I'm just logging into ichingonline.net, which I had the question stored. This is great. Have you heard of this thing, I Ching Online?
Uh, you want to send me the link here?
Yeah, great. CCI. Okay, I have the number, and yeah, it was a moving line. It was from 42 to 61.
Uh-huh.
So
42.
42 expansion. When a superior person encounters saintly behavior, he adopts it. When he encounters a fault within, he transforms it. Progress in every endeavor, you may cross to the far shore. You see, and I was like, wow, this is unexpectedly positive. I mean, to me, it was possible. And then,
Okay, so it was 42 hexagram E.
Mm,
The Wilhelm. I mean, I start personally with deoxy.org.
right.
Deoxy.org.
Yeah.
They have a few. They offer three versions.
Okay, let me
One
just
is
go.
the Wilhelm Baines traditional Richard Wilhelm translation.
Right.
Um, and then under that they have James Lega, which is older, which is was traditionally, his influence was very Confucian, his mentors.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's very much about rulership. But
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's very appropriate and very concise answers for the moving lines particularly. So I like that. And then there's some strange thing called I Ching plus hexagram notes, which is very subtle. We talked about it. Right?
Yeah. It's a genius guy,
So
apparently.
what was the moving line for 42?
The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The fifth one down.
You mean 9 in the fifth place? If in truth you have a kind heart, ask not.
I don't even hold on. Changing
The
line one.
changing lines go from the bottom up.
Oh, bottom up. Okay.
So it's either 2 or 5.
You know what, Scott? I think it might be easier for me to send you a screenshot of this because I want to make sure I'm giving you the right thing.
Well, it's hexagram 42, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and from the bottom, which line is changing? Is it a yin going to a yang? A broken to
It
unbroken?
is. It is a broken going to unbroken.
So it's the second line.
Read from the bottom up. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, well, the, you know, if I asked or how I would read that for you, this is basically the idea that
And
there's a sacrifice.
my question was, what happens if I continue to smoke marijuana?
Or whenever you see the judgment that says it furthers one to undertake something, that means yes, do it. And whenever it says it furthers one to cross the great ocean, that's also a confirmation that action is suitable, action is favorable. So there's nothing negative at all about that judgment, the judgment of E42 increase. The image is actually related to what I was saying. The image says wind, and this is Wilhelm, wind and thunder, the image of increase. Thus the superior man, if he sees good, he imitates it. If he has faults, he rids himself of them. And that sounds to be similar to how you're using that for yourself. You're trying to use that for your own greater learning.
Yeah,
And
I am indeed.
remain aware of blockages or dependency. I mean, it's okay to enjoy life. That's why people drink, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think there's anything really wrong with letting the mind expand a bit. That doesn't have to be disciplined practice all the time. Like, it's okay to drink a glass of red wine sometimes.
Yeah.
This is basically saying it's fine, and in fact, it's good. That's what the judgment says. The judgment is saying it's good to continue, and the image is saying be aware of how you're using and what's happening to you, and your intentions and your inner conditions. And when you find blockages, or you find dependency, or you find avoidance, or you find something that is not honest and self-loving, then seek to dissolve and release the blockage. So that's saying keep your discernment.
Yeah.
And keep looking inside. The second line is also positive. Usually second and fifth lines in I Ching are very positive when they're moving.
I see.
So this 6 in the second place means someone does increase him. 10 pairs of tortoises cannot oppose it. This is actually a really nice moving line. Constant perseverance brings good fortune. The king presents him before God. good fortune, lots of good fortune there.
Hmm.
So when you see 10 pairs of tortoises cannot oppose it, you know you're in good shape. It means that that was the old way of divination 2,000 plus years ago in China. They would heat um, tortoise shell, the back, I guess it's the whole back convex portion of a tortoise, and they would put a hot rod into it. The tortoise had been eaten by that time, or maybe left to be eaten later. But they would put the hot iron into it and then read the lines, the fracture lines that came from it.
Wow, interesting.
So this someone does indeed increase him is saying that your current usage is good for you. That's what it says. That's how I would put it. And
that's great.
because you're careful. I mean, I'm not condoning illegal activity.
Yeah.
But this explanation is certainly supportive of continuance in the activity. 10 pairs of tortoises can't oppose it. It means you don't even have to ask again, because further divination won't oppose it. Another view is not necessary. The answer is it's fine or it's good, and also keep constant perseverance, which means when you find a problem in your mind with this, take a look at it and take care of it, and don't get stuck and don't hurt yourself. And then the king presents him before God. It means that there's some spiritual benefit to you in this action, and that may be why you even found it in the first place.
It is, and it's why I do it in the first place. Because I realized that I, for one, am a very uptight person. I'm very tense. I can't relax. I'm very left brain, very goal oriented. And when I smoked it, when I first smoked weed, I very quickly realized that this was something very beneficial for my mental state, because it allows me to just chill out, and not only chill out, but there's definitely an expansion of creativity and making the links between disjointed sets of knowledge, shall I say. And to me, marijuana is very much interlinked with my right brain functioning, the intuitive, going the flow, abstract. Well, more abstract kind of thoughts than the left brain, which to me, I've been so familiar with for the last 25 years of my life.
Right.
And the funny thing is, I did another question. And actually, what happens if I continue to smoke marijuana was my second question. I consulted I Ching twice, actually, at this time, because I was worried that I was getting addicted to this thing, and I didn't know if I was under a delusional state, and I was kind of denying it. And I said that's why I consulted I Ching, because I felt like it would give me an impartial view, in that sense, because in this state I couldn't trust the regular intuitive insight. Now, I asked another reading, which is, why do I smoke marijuana? And it gave me... Sorry?
That was your first or second question?
First question is, why do I smoke? And then second question is, what happens if I continue to smoke? Now, the first question result was 39.
39.
With two changing lines, both unbroken... both broken, continuing to broken in the first and the second. The two lower ones.
Okay, let me see if I can find what I need here. What was the other hexagram?
39. 39.
Okay. 39.
It's just, take a look, because it was extremely positive, and I wanted to, yeah.
Okay. Hold a moment, huh?
is very exciting.
Yeah, I've done professional. I've read professionally, or I mean, people wanted a session on I Ching. I could certainly do that.
Lovely.
Yeah, I Ching or 39 is obstruction.
Yeah.
And this was why do I do it?
Yeah. Why do I smoke marijuana?
Because you have a blockage. That's why I said obstruction.
Interesting.
The point is that you have a blockage, and so we all do have blockages. This obstruction equals distortion, equals blockage, and
Hello?
You say I was uptight and very linear, very illogical, analytical, and more in the thinking function than the feeling.
Yes, definitely.
So this 39 is a difficult hexagram. It's basically keeping still in the presence of danger, surrounded by obstacles. A hexagram represents obstructions that appear in the course of time. That's different than obstructions caused by your own action. And so there are different kinds of obstructions that are indicated by the I Ching. Those that come in time are transient. They come and then they go. Those that we're creating or created by our actions point to a deeper blockage that needs a lot of more attention. Right. So this is a little bit more like saying you got to just grin and bear it or just go through it. And the particular moving line is very important in this hexagram. So the southwest furthers, the northeast does not further. That may or may not have any meaning to you in terms of location. In general, like the explanation here, southwest is the region of retreat, northeast that of advance. Here an individual is confronted by obstacles that cannot be overcome directly. So these obstacles are basically blockages in mind, in you. You're talking primarily, not only. And so in such a situation, it's wise to pause in view of the danger and to retreat. So it's saying that your usage is more of cleaning house than going on an expedition. It's more of allowing a greater flow of thought and understanding and feeling than simply for the information you're getting.
Yeah.
The information is useful, maybe, like you read, Bhagavad Gita, but the purpose of the outer working by this is the interchange of allowing the obstacles or obstructions to dissolve through greater opening. And again, the image is talking about what you need to, how to pay attention to what's important. The image of obstruction, the spirit man turns his attention to himself and molds character. And so it's saying, use it. You're using it for self healing and to move through obstructions in mind and keep it focused. So there's guidance given too, not only explanation and answer. So there's sometimes the I Ching often gives an answer to the question along with further guidance for further self-development. So the answer is that this is an obstruction associated with the choice of family and circumstance in this lifetime, and that you can work your way out of it. You have to be patient and not push hard, and you need to keep your attention on developing, love, wisdom, carefully. Now, the specificity comes from the moving lines. Which were the lines that were moving?
The first and second one.
Okay, the bottom and the second one, up from the bottom?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, well, both of these are fine. The first one is the first stage of moving through. The second is the second stage of moving through. It represents, there's often a sequence, a sequentiality of meaning through the lines from the bottom one to the top six. And that's the case in certain action, some certain transformation-oriented hexagrams. So 6 at the beginning, bottom means going leads to obstructions, coming meets with praise. Again, it's saying don't try to achieve any big thing here, and stay close to yourself and open your heart, actually. It says, when threatened with danger, the danger here, there may be some implication that there are blockages in your mind you're not aware of, as often is the case. And you may at some point feel or find some kind of emotional uprising that's upsetting, like fear or sadness or anger.
Yeah.
So it may allow the bringing up of painful or disturbing emotions.
Yeah, I think it does that. Yeah, I could see
and
that.
Marijuana is in some ways what I would call a thought amplifier. It's been understood that way. A thought amplifier is where you can hear yourself thinking better. But again, it depends on the intention. Some people make sure, they put their mind into something trivial, or they try to avoid inner feeling. But in many ways, it allows you to feel and hear your mind better.
Yeah.
And so it says the correct thing is to retreat, not in order to give up the struggle, but to await the right moment for action, which is also saying that it may be that you're going in further than you will need to go further in the future, or you won't need it as much later, and this is a phase.
Yeah, that's great to hear, because I really want to phase it out of my life.
You can, and so it's saying, okay, well then you see the I Ching for any true divination, in some ways knows your mind better than you do, and so particularly with I Ching, it's often addressing deeper issues that you're not aware of, and the deeper issue here that you are aware of is that you don't want to get stuck in this. And that's why they're talking about danger, because you're considering your continued use danger. And this is some kind of statement that, yeah, there is a sort of danger here, because you could, become dissociated from society, or get into addiction, or like it too much, and avoid some other things that are important. And so it's saying, don't give up the struggle, but await the right moment for action, means at the right time, you won't need this. And the second line is indicating that you may be feeling more stress or have more difficulty in your life than you're aware of, or maybe more than you told me. So it's saying the king's servant is beset by obstruction upon obstruction, but it's not his own fault. The king's servant is you, which means you're doing this for your highest and best good. You have good intentions. And so if it said the king's servant, it means you, and that's a praise or commendation. So that's not bad if you ever see that again. Obstruction upon obstruction means there's a lot of blockage here and a lot of hardship, actually. It's not really your own fault, but you're trying to work out from where you were before.
Well, the funny thing is, I felt like this had a double meaning as well, because you see, it says here, you may either continue banging your head with irresistible force against this immovable object, or you might step back and survey this situation from a fresh perspective. And I felt like this was relating to the question itself. So I decided to stop smoking for 2 weeks after this, just to clear my head, because obviously that's what it's telling me. It's like saying, you can't see the clear answer for smoking or not smoking right now. You're just thinking in terms of a limited sense. You need to stop for a while and take a fresh perspective, which worked.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's my interpretation.
Yeah, you see, again, if you're using, you're using a different translation or a different commentary book, right?
Yeah, I'm
What
just reading off the whatever's available here. I don't know where
do
it's
you
from.
link to that exact page?
Uh, it's actually, I think it's it
What
doesn't
hex?
have a reference. It doesn't have. It's hexagrams 39.
Okay, but can you show me the page link here? Is it I Ching Online Net?
Yes. Okay, one sec. Can I paste it on the chat?
Yeah.
Okay.
But the point is just that there are many different translations, and there are many different
Yeah,
people who have something to say about this.
I see what
So
you mean. So be careful, as in like, right.
you really should be careful because personally, I don't really like other translations. I stay with Wilhelm Baines and Lega a little bit, and that's about it. And
Mm,
I've used it for a long time, so I know what they mean.
yeah, I hear you.
So, but if you're using a certain deck or a certain translation,
Mm-hmm.
deck of tarot with its own meanings or translation with those meanings, the higher entities know that that's what you're going to be reading.
Ah, right.
And
Brilliant.
so they would
That's very helpful.
direct you to the meaning in that source that would be different from another source that you're not going to be using,
Mm,
even if it's the same hexagram.
mm,
So uh, you'd have to look in and say, well, is this explaining? But then we really should just be analyzing what you were given rather than what other translations say.
yeah, I hear you. Scott, maybe to zoom out, to zoom out, not to bore the listeners with too much of my personal life. Let's go back to the I Ching from a top level overview, and maybe let's talk about the I Ching from a broad perspective.
Okay.
Uh, and do you want to talk a little bit about the you were saying before 2 into 6 and then to 64, or did I get that right?
Oh, yeah. You're talking about, yeah, the numerics here.
Yeah, and I'm also kind of reminded of this uh Terence McKenna. Have you heard of
Right.
Terence McKenna?
Yeah, sure.
He describes the I Ching as the physics of time, which is a really profound phrase. Do you want to talk about that?
Um, yeah, I mean, the physics of, I don't know what physics, there's a scientific aspect or a kind of metaphysical the mathematics of metaphysics,
Mm-hmm.
which is similar to the fact that, well, the 7 colors of light in the rainbow, in the chakras, represent particular gradations or
Mm,
frequencies, and they have relationships to each other that are mathematical.
mm,
So in the I Ching, you start with the 2, which is a broken line yin and unbroken yang.
mm-hmm.
Those 2 are then built up into 8 trigram meaning 3 of the lines. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's called Ba Gua. Ba is 8, Gua is form, like uh, karate form almost.
Mm-hmm.
And so a form, one of the 8 forms, these
Right.
Ba Gua,
To the power of
uh,
3, yeah?
what's that?
2 to the power of 3, 8.
Yes, yes, yes. And so you have 8 choices there, or
Yeah.
8 different arrangements
Mm,
of the 2.
mm,
And then the 8 is compound, is squared by adding the 8 trigrams together into 64 hexagrams.
yeah.
So the 64 comes from 8, the 8 comes from 2, well, it actually comes from 3, and that it comes from 2. So the principle of 2 goes to the principle of 3, then 8, then 64.
Mm,
Now, I don't really know physics so well, and it may be that sequence of 23864 has some mathematical meaning or usage or place in biology or in physics. I just don't know that.
I think what Terence was trying to say is that, from what I understand, he was saying that we have explored, in terms of time space, we've explored space very well, and we know what are the elementary particles of space, which are like quarks and atoms and all that. But Terence was saying that there's a minute, again, the same kind of minute elemental particle of time, and he was saying that the I Ching is a representation of the system.
Yeah, I actually can't really comment on that. There is a binary aspect. There's something called the King One WEN King One sequence, which is a sequence of the 64 that have a certain relationship, internal relations. I haven't studied that,
right.
But since everything is based on broken or unbroken line, you can say that it's binary code of 0 or 1.
Right.
0 maybe yin and 1 is unbroken. There is some importance to 64, in relation to the DNA, right? I'm sure there's a higher meaning to that I'm just not familiar with that. But time is basically a function of consciousness. And so at the level of higher self, in the consciousness of unity, there's no experience of time, or higher self, what we would say, stands outside of time and space.
Yeah.
The consciousness of linear progression is understood to be empty, or as emptiness. So the yin and the yang are seen as one, which is basically the flow of light and dark, or expansion, contraction. The primary duality of light is actually the basis for the I Ching. The primary duality of light is the two, which is basically kinetic and potential. Potential yin, kinetic yang, potential 0, kinetic 1. Passive going to active, or yin going to yang. This is the way light is, and this is also related to the chakras, in that there's 2 lines. There's 1, 3, 5, 7, and there's 2, 4, 6. 1, 3, 5, 7 is the hard line, or yang, associated more with left brain. The soft line 2, 4, 6 is more associated with right brain. The 2, 4, 6 line is, of course, more about feeling and intuition and holism.
Oh wow! I've never seen it that way. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the 1, 3, 5, 7 line is associated with conceptuality and differentiation, which are functions of wisdom. So I did a video on this called Cosmic Numerics of 1372.
1357.
It's actually 1372.
Why 2 at the end?
Actually, the 2, that's just one way of doing it, because there are 2 functions of light, because the 7 are functions of light. You see, the 1 is the one infinite creator, or intelligent infinity. Before the 1 is the 0, actually. So before the 0 is the void, which is pre-manifestation, before the Big Bang. Before a Big Bang is intelligent infinity. That's the void. That is also a 0, and that's actually 1, because it's non-differentiated. It's the one infinite intelligence, pre-manifestation. Then you have a Big Bang. That Big Bang, however, is the result of that the Big Bang is a 7. You can say it's a 1, but actually, before there was a creation, there's an intermediary step between the void, the 0 void, or the 1 becoming the in Chinese, the 10,000 things.
Hmm.
The intermediary step is the three laws. This is on my, you may want to link to this later. It's a
Yeah,
YouTube video
I'll
called
take a look
Cosmic.
at it. Hmm.
I'll show you the link later.
Cool.
Cosmic numerics. The idea is then from the infinite intelligent void, which is a one or a zero. It's a zero or infinity. It's an infinity 0, 1, all the same. Infinite one void. Infinite unified void. But it's a plenum, or it's pure potential. It's the infinite manifest in the infinity of potential before manifestation. Before manifestation, it manifests as three principles of mind, and those are the three laws, which are in some systems called the three rays, the first three rays of the seven rays, different than chakras, but similar. In Ra's metaphysics, it's the law of free will, the law of love, and the law of light. Now, the law of free will is basically the realization that I am free. The infinite creator appreciating its own freedom to be whatever it is, and wishing that that itself, in its manifest form, enjoys that freedom too. The law of love is the intrinsic love that is the basis for that wish, wish of freedom for all. The all is the one, of course. It's the one infinite creator. So it's the creator's infinite love of its own being and its appreciation of freedom as a function of that infinite love. That then gives rise to light. And so Ra said, the nature of all energy is light. The origin of all light is the action of free will upon love.
Wow.
That's a very heavy line.
Yeah, it is.
The origin of light is the action of free will upon love. The infinite freedom of the infinite creator, appreciating that freedom is infinite love. But the desire that it itself, in its manifestation as the 10,000 things, meaning galaxies and planets and suns and dimensions and beings and all that, the infinite creator in its appearance as limited form, the 10,000 things, having freedom, the desire that it maintains that freedom, acts upon its infinite love. It's infinite love appreciates that freedom, and that produces light.
So maybe just to step it down a bit, in our universe, which is a universe of love, we have these downstreamings of light from higher dimensions to help us along the way. Would that be an example of what you're saying?
Well, the universe, the infinite creation, is itself an expression of infinite love. And that's why Ra says love, light, light, love. So the origin of light is the action of free will upon love. Therefore, light, which means vibration, which means all octaves, all dimensional levels of all octaves, meaning all material bodies such as galaxies, stars, and planets, and the octaves associated with them, which are 7-dimensional systems. That's all light. But the nature of that light it partakes of its origin. The origin is infinite love. So all light is an expression of infinite love. So that's why they call it light love or love light. And so it's a funny kind of thing. You can say there are three principles or three laws: the law of free will, the law of love, the law of light. Therefore, the third comes after the second, comes after the first, or the interplay of free will and love creates light. You can also say that there are only two principles: free will and love light. Free will is the yang, and love light is the yin, actually. But
wow.
So you can split it a few ways. You can split the three down to two, or you can say that the third aspect of the three comes out as a duality. So you can say that if we're saying there are three laws, free will and love and light, the the third principle of light came out of the interplay of the first two, right? The action of free will upon love. But since that light is actually born of love, and since all is one, they're really only one. But if you want to be discerning a little bit, you can say that there's free will, and then the love light that manifests naturally from it. The other way is that the third principle of light is itself dualistic, meaning positive and negative charge. There's positive and negative, meaning there's electromagnetism. The electrical is the yang or kinetic. The magnetic is the yin or love or absorptive. So the yin-yang can be understood as two qualities of light. So what is light? Light is energy. What's energy? It's a particle in the field. What the hell does that mean? Well, it means that the vibration manifests as particle and field simultaneously. What is vibration? Vibration is basically the result of infinite freedom and love that let there be light with the desire. It's simply the desire of the infinite creator to experience itself in manifold form and in freedom. And just so happens that the highest work of the confederation of planets that help planet Earth, among other solar systems, is what Ra calls a protection of the parameters of free will. And that's exactly the way higher self is. Higher self won't answer every question, and therefore not all divination finds a response.
Right.
If it infringes on your free will to be confused so that you do it yourself. And so the 64 coming from the 8, and the 8 coming from the 3 or the 2, ultimately comes from the 2. That 2, 0 and 1, yin and yang, broken and unbroken, is basically a reflection of the two qualities of light, being electric and magnetic, being positive and negatively polarized.
Scott, can we take a 3-minute break? I need to go to the toilet.
It's okay.
I'll call you back.
Okay.
Bye. Hey, Scott.
Okay. I was in the bathroom too.
Yeah. Excellent.
So, yes, what do you think of all this? Tell me, are you recording again?
Yeah, we're on.
Okay. So, what do you think?
It's a level of abstraction which I guess I'm seeking to understand the love light principle. I mean, I think I came from it from a somewhat more simplistic point of view, which is that love is 4th chakra and light is 5th chakra.
Yes, that's in an understanding of the 7 rays or 7 chakras or 7 dimensions. As we progress up, love can be associated with 4th ray and light with 5th. As understanding the 7 as the product of the 3, we see it in a different way. And Ra actually even mentioned that the second law, or called the second law, the law of love, which is pre-manifest. These laws are basically principles in the mind of the infinite creator. Seen as pre-creational, the 3 laws separate love and light, and the love is actually what Ra calls an enabling function. It's basically the active portion of free will. The active portion of infinite free will is infinite love. And that interplay created light. And so then in that light, you see, when you're talking about the third principle, the third law being the law of light, Then we're talking about then we're talking about energy, matter, and vibration. Energy, matter, and vibration, or matter, energy, vibration, as we know it now, is post-creational, or the manifestation of the three laws. Before the creation of matter, energy, and vibration, there were the three principles or three laws. And that level of love, the second law, the law of love, calling it an enabling function. That's why the positive path is favored. Because although the Creator is beyond polarity and duality, its nature is resonant with what we call love. And that's why heart chakra is in the center of the seven. Because the source of infinite light or creation is infinite love.
It's it's beginning to make a little bit of sense to me. I mean, I'm seeing this as division, right? You have the one principle, like you were saying, one principle dividing the three, dividing the seven.
Right. And yeah.
And I guess I was in a way fixated with the seven, and I didn't see that there was a precursor to the seven, which is the three. And
right.
I'm seeing that now.
Right. And the reason I initially, I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, to say 1, 2, 3, 7 may be okay, but actually, the reason I said 1, 3, 7, 2 is that the 7 can be seen in a dual way. That's all. The 7 rays of light can be seen, in an active and a passive form, electro and magnetic, transmissive and receptive.
So would you say 3 to 7 was the birth of duality?
Oh yeah, what I mean is, the three principles or three laws are pre-creation. They're pre-vibratory.
I see.
And that's why Ra said you are dancing thoughts.
Right. So 3 is non-dual.
Yeah, 3 is pre-vibrational.
Okay. Right.
And so vibration itself is duality.
Right.
All perception of you see, reality itself cannot be explained by the words dual or non-dual. Buddha never spoke about dual, non-dual. He spoke about nibbana or dukkha. Either you're in suffering, dukkha, because of avidya, ignorance, or you've done moksha, liberation, and you're in nibbana, which is blowing out the flame of seeking, actually, and beyond conceptualization. So you can say that vibration is, by its very nature, dualistic, in that there's the supposition of a substance and motion. Right? Vibration represents motion of substance, meaning there's a distinction between, the object, the subject being the substance, which is light, and its activity or its transformation, which is vibration or movement. But that's, again, a perception based on avidya, based on ignorance. The Buddha said, even consciousness is born of ignorance, meaning belief in the substantiality of consciousness, or being bound to specific consciousness, even the consciousness of unity, is pre-enlightenment, or it's basically, sixth density, not yet fully enlightened.
Right.
Because the point is that even consciousness itself, right? I'm sitting here talking to you, you're conscious of hearing, I'm conscious of speaking, or sitting in the room, whatever. Considered as discrete experiences, is the result of limited perception. And also identified even as such is the result of limited perception. It's like if you see the ocean and you say, I see 10,000 waves, then you don't see the ocean.
Right.
And when you see the ocean, you can say, well, I know I can see 10,000 waves, but actually this is one ocean. it's a little different.
I back to love and light and the seven chakras. I actually had this concept that light is superior to love because it was sitting above in terms of the chakra scale. That's not accurate, is it?
No, actually, you see you see now we're getting even more abstruse. What we call love, being a manifestation of fourth chakra activation, is actually pre-unified, is a resonance with the awareness of unity, but it's actually a dualistic love. And it's a love that doesn't partake of unity. That's why it's 4 below 6. And therefore, there is the belief in duality still with that love.
At the fourth chakra.
The fourth chakra love. Exactly. Good that you specified. In then the progression up the chakras, 5 resting upon 4, is basically because the limit of wisdom is the limit of love. The capacity for knowing is dependent on the capacity for seeing and acceptance.
Ah.
And so I wrote about this. I wrote 2 essays on fifth chakra. The quantity and quality of seeing, thereby knowing, is limited by the capacity to unconditionally accept all. And so the limits of acceptance create limits in wisdom or perception of truth or systems and patterns, which is what wisdom is. So to the extent, and Ross said that the fifth chakra is the first that's outgoing as well as incoming, which is a subtle hint that the fourth chakra, love, is incoming, not outgoing, meaning you can't give love, but you can be love. You can be in the receptive state of unconditional acceptance, which is love. But it's not yet outgoing, and that's the limitation of love without wisdom. When then love goes to a higher octave or a higher level, it becomes wisdom. So wisdom is actually love at the conceptual, with the conceptual function, or the knowing function. So knowing is love, and love is a form of knowing. Heavy duty, eh?
No, it's amazing. I'm learning a lot today.
So in that sense, you can say that wisdom surmounts love. On the other, in the dualistic sense of their significance as points in mind. You see, at one point, Ra let the cat out of the bag, and they said the blue-green chakra, the blue-green center. That means blue 5, green 4. That actually they are 2 sides of the same, and that's what love-light means. Yes, in the sense that light, that vibration has 2 primary qualities. It's bipolar. There's a polarity in light itself, which is basically vibration or stillness, which is basically manifestation or non-manifestation, because stillness becomes non-manifestation. Stillness is the cover to emptiness, in a way. That's another story. But to the extent that you see in understanding body, mind, spirit, a handy way is that 1, 2, 3 is body, personality, common sense of self. 4, 5 is mind, blue-green center. And 6, 7 is spirit. So in the center, mind, 4, 5, love and wisdom have to be understood as the 2 primary functions and the nature of mind itself. The nature of mind itself as an energy field has a polar nature, which is incoming and outgoing. And fifth chakra allows both functions, while fourth only the receptive. Yeah. But quality of transmission depends on the quality of reception. What you know depends on the degree to which you can see and accept.
So would you say teaching is then very much a fifth chakra thing rather than a fourth chakra thing?
Yes, and teaching may or may not involve fourth chakra. Negative teachers who teach or just, lie people, lying teachers or negative leaders or negative people, when they speak, it's a form of wisdom without love.
Sure.
Or it's the negative use of wisdom. So wisdom is in a certain way impartial or non-neutral. And that's related to the 1357 line anyway.
Yeah.
But the two wings of the bird are love, wisdom. And that's the powered, that comes out in the duality of right leg, right arm, left arm, and above the diaphragm and below. And that duality is intrinsic to the nature of light. So the nature of mind is a reflection of the nature of light. Oh my God. So actually, mind is itself a creation of light, or it's the self-reflection of light itself. Mind is light, in that the vibration of creation in its self-reflective form is the source of mind.
Yeah.
The self-reflection of vibration itself actually is sentience, and that's mind.
That's very interesting, because I've been I had this insight the other day, and it was about eating meat. And I actually considered the idea that, in the same way that species of trees would manufacture or evolve very tasty fruits in order to propagate the species, certain animals might be doing that in terms of how tasty their meat is. Which would naturally, so in fact, like pigs, for example, what if the pig species mind was manufacturing tasty meat, and so our duty then is to eat the pig so that the pig species would propagate, because then we would rear pigs. You know what I mean?
You spoken like a true Chinese.
No, but I felt like this was a real wisdom fifth chakra insight.
Yeah, I think so.
Actually, it had no emotional attachment.
Yes. Yeah, I know. It doesn't come from you hoping to eat some meat.
It's saying, I genuinely see that the pig species might be wanting to propagate. And
the question is, how does second density evolve into third? And in the Alice Bailey material, Theosophy, although there are other big problems with it, there are many important or interesting insights, one of which is their statement from Bailey, Jwal, whoever spoke or channeled it, that there are two ways for the animal kingdom to evolve to the human. One is domestication, and the other one is slaughter. And domestication is basically the investment of love into the animal by the human, loving. And that love creates individuation. And that's comparable to early childhood issues.
Right, like cats and dogs.
Well, cats and dogs, being higher members of the second density group, kingdom, are those very close to harvest into 3D, or human individualization. They're basically, the second chakra, or second density life, is conscious, and it's striving, but it's not yet self-conscious. Third density, at the human level, is self-conscious. Ra said that one of the ways that animals individuate or become harvest into 3D, is by close interaction with human, which is investment of love. The care of the human, the person, for the animal, helps the animal develop a sense of self.
Yeah.
And that facilitates harvest or graduation into 3D. Going back to Bailey, then, that is Ra's explanation of domestication, which is basically love investment facilitating the growth of self-consciousness. The second way that second density animals grow into third, according to Bailey, is slaughter. Slaughter involves eating them, killing and eating. And there's not only the interaction of the slaughterhouse, which is, of course, based on fear and pain and trauma and terror and many negative things, but there's also the passage of the animal body through the human. that's eating it.
Mm.
Both of those have an effect metaphysically on the consciousness of the animal oversoul.
Wow.
And the particular being that is eaten. Although you see, you don't normally eat the higher members. People normally don't eat
Whales.
elephants, monkeys, dogs, and cats, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Or whale.
Yeah.
So that's interesting too.
That makes much sense to me. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's some kind of unconscious taboo in the human mind against eating dogs, cats, monkeys, and elephants
Ah.
because they're almost like people.
Yes.
And that's cannibalism, which, is not too good. So this second means being slaughter indicates that not only by love, but also by fear can there be the development of a sense of self. But meaning that the fear of the slaughter process, you see, the fear of the animal is really a more momentary thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, I'm not saying killing is good and I don't kill, but the fear is momentary. It's the longer association by the animal slaughtering, animals for food interaction, and then also the ingestion. And the ingestion is very subtle because there's some link between human consciousness then and the astral remnant of the animal in the body. And that's why some religions like Hindu yoga are against eating meat, because this bring down your vibration. Yeah. In some sense, that can be true. And so you often see, you can see people who eat meat like animals, and they eat meat, and, they're not particularly evolved. So there is some association, for sure, with animal consciousness by eating meat. And yet, the Buddha ate meat, too. But he ate once a day, and he's not lusting for flesh. So it's not a big deal.
Do you eat meat?
I do, yeah, sure. But I don't kill animals. And except for cockroaches and mosquitoes and gnats. But right. But I announced it to them. So if they want to be killed, they come in front of me. But I have very tender feelings for many animals, like snails and cats and butterflies. So, no, I try to save little bugs if they get into the wrong place and blow them outside on my hand or something.
I think that makes sense. I mean, you shouldn't senselessly kill anything.
Well, you see, the Buddha, go back to the Buddha's teaching about food and meat. The monks were not prohibited from eating meat. In fact, they normally ate meat. They ate what they were given. Okay? They didn't pick and choose. But they didn't, there were two rules about that. Number one, it's a major, it's actually like a penalty or a major, it can't be called sin, but a fault, a major fault or offense, actually, is the term. It's like parajika. A major offense to kill. It's also somewhat significant if you eat the meat that was killed specifically for you. If you ordered it to be killed for you, or if you knew it was killed for you, you can't eat it. But if it's not killed for you and you didn't kill it, it's okay. And I think that reflects some karmic law, that there's very different karmic consequences between killing an animal, eating it after it's been killed for you or asked to be killed for you, or eating somebody's, meat dish that they just give you, or that's sitting in the store somewhere. So that's very important, actually. But I totally agree that there is there's a metaphysical interplay between the human and the animal that very much does include eating meat for the benefit of both.
Yeah,
it's not true that humans were meant to not eat meat. If they were, we would be sick by eating meat. But actually, some body types do very well eating meat and get very sick not. So there's another source that actually indicated certain animals were placed here to be eaten, while other animals not, and never. And that source actually was Hilarion channeling from Maurice Cook in Toronto a long time ago, 30 years ago. And so that's also another view.
I'm just kind of thinking out loud here. It's almost like a codependent relationship between a very evolved man and a somewhat less evolved woman, and you know, maybe the man dominates the woman, but through this kind of interplay of projecting their stuff onto each other, they find closure, and they learn to see each other as mirrors.
If that's what they seek, they can. I mean, it's the uses of distortion. I mean, normally people get together as a couple because they have comparable distortions. And it may be dominant submission or something like that. I mean, you often see in spiritual communities a very strong or dominant spiritual teacher, sixth chakra, fifth chakra, well developed, who's lacking in love and is somewhat abusive or controlling, which is so common these days. And then their followers are love-based, goodly and sincere, but not self-confident and not so clear in mind. So the student comes with 4 developed more than 5 and 6. The teacher presents with 6 and 5 well-developed, but lacking in 4. What happens next is, you know, whatever they choose. But even though the student thinks the teacher is so great, and then finds out later that the teacher actually is controlling and somewhat negative, they were able to use the relationship, which is in some ways the relationship of their own distortions and where they are, for a positive development. So that can happen in a couple where there's some imbalance or complementary distortions, and then they can use that to help each other. But that may or may not happen.
Scott, one last question before we close. I wanted to ask you about the position of the chakras in the human body. Why is the heart chakra in the chest? Why is the fifth chakra in the throat?
Oh, that's very esoteric. Well,
and I'm also looking at Leonardo da Vinci. Well, I'm looking at Leonardo da Vinci's what's his name, Vitruvian Man or something. The one in the circle, and looking at sacred geometry stuff. I'm just having this intuitive leaning towards this birth of the human body out of geometry. You know.
Well, the seven chakras came out of the one. So the seven chakras appear columnar. They appear as a column, vertical column. The top is the crown, the bottom is the root chakra being triadic, actually, the balls of the feet or the base of the feet and the base of the spine. So there's actually a pyramidal structure to the root chakra. And the crown chakra or pineal gland is also pyramidal or triangular. But the 7 can be seen more accurately as spherical. And so the center of the sphere is 4th chakra. Next band, then we get into the concept of chakra bands. This came to me also as inspiration. The chakra bands are similar to the Hebrew menorah, which is where you have 7 candles with the center candle being taller than the others. So think of bullseye. In the center is 4. The next ring is 5-3, then 6-2, then 7-1. So the chakra banding of 7-1, 6-2, 5-3, and 4 in the center is a closer approximation to the spherical nature of body, mind, spirit.
Wow.
So that chakra banding also shows you, explains Heraclitus, who said the way forward is the way back. because
Do
the
you have a
capacity.
diagram for this?
Yeah, I have this. Yeah, I can send it to you later.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, the diagram's in Japanese, but
Okay.
uh, it's the characters are Japanese, but symbols are symbols. The development of upper six depends on the clearance of lower two.
So that
2.2 is resonant with 6.6
I see there's a symmetry there.
because it's a banding, because it's spherical. And so the reason that the fifth chakra is where it is because of the significance of the 5-3 band. The reason that 6 is in the forehead is the relation between the 6-2 band, the meaning of the 6-2 band in the sphere, and the 7-1 band likewise. So these are the three chakra bands, 7-1, 6-2, 5-3 with 4 in the center. The significance of the placement has to do with the combined meaning of the band. So
Wow.
5-3 is the proximity to heart chakra. And the basically the hard line, you see. These are the two lines. 1, 3, 5, 7 is the 1-7. 2, 4, 6 is the 2-6. 1, 3, 5, 7 is the core, 3, 5. So to understand 3 and 5, you'd have to understand the reason that it's the center of the hard line. The hard line being 1, 3, 5, 7, the yang line, or transmission, light over the love, the light principle over love. We divide it that way. The light principle is basically the band that surrounds the heart center directly. And it's the combined meaning of fifth ray, third ray, each of the meanings as a light amplifier in the hard line of 1, 3, 5, 7.
Amazing.
Yeah, well, you bring out good information because you have good questions.
Thank you. I'm endlessly curious, so
Yeah, well, we can continue our talks
Yeah,
until harvest, and we just save them for the Akashic Library.
That
But
sounds like a
I
great idea.
appreciate your excellent questions and very pure seeking of wisdom. You're not somebody. A couple of people that I know also commented that they really appreciate these interviews, and it's very much related to you. So, because you have no agenda to push at all. You simply ask questions that are important to you and interesting to you for the pure achievement of understanding, not for any personal gain or positioning.
Yeah.
So that's great. It's pure philosophy or pure seeking.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a pleasure. It's such a pleasure to learn and to put. Well, for me, it's like putting the pieces together like a puzzle, and then you understand the body, you understand the chakras, you understand how the chakras relate to psychology and archetypes.
Right.
And it's amazing. It's the whole thing is just a gigantic Rubik's cube.
Yeah, I mean, it all is one, which means there's interplay between all the elements in a systematic or organized, orderly, symmetrical way, and that's because all elements are identical ultimately with all other elements. They just look different because of perception.
Sure.
So love and light are basically the operative principles of evolution. And the basis of it all is free will, which is basically the freedom of the infinite being, the infinite creation as a being, its own freedom, and the extension of that condition to itself in the manifest condition, or in the manifest phase, post-creation, of creation. So creation and pre-creation are basically, the yin and the yang of the all. And so that goes back again to a 2, which is a 1. Every 2 is a 1, and every 1 is empty.
I'm a bit lost, but I would definitely go and revisit these things that we've talked about, especially the things which I'm not familiar with. Scott, we're just
Yeah.
gonna wrap up this one. Do you have any kind of last things you'd like to mention?
No, just thank you for the talks, and I enjoyed it a lot too.
Likewise, and thank you so much for your wisdom.
You're welcome.
Okay, guys, so do leave us a comment if you like, or more questions, or even further topics that you'd like to listen from me and Scott. Until next time, it's Ken and Scott Mandelker. Bye.
Then there's the general rule. The general rule is that certain states of consciousness and certain sounds have effect at certain levels or dimensions in the non-physical. And so, on the one hand, you can, by the use of a very particular mantra, intoned exactly in the original way, which is all hidden these days. That's even the Brahmins of India. They don't they don't even pronounce exactly the way it used to be, or sometimes they veil it. So there's the use of very specific calling mechanisms, like that kind of a mantra or invocation, that are actually kind of by necessity or by law demand response or require response from either particularly, sometimes even a particular entity.
Wow.
But that's not really the common use of divination. Divination normally proceeds by a certain need and then a certain quality of calling. And you get what you call for depending on who you are, how you've developed yourself. And so if you've developed yourself by a lot of study, then you can actually make sense of more information.
Yeah.
And if the conscious mind has not been developed, you won't get necessarily information that that goes into certain detail. It's very complicated. And then there are positive and negative entities. And so to the extent that there's selfishness in the calling, then positive entities won't have a part of it. Or the contact is mixed. It's a mixed contact. So it's interestingly, actually, I just read the other day, Ra was commenting on a question from Don about the Billy Meyer contact, the Palladian contact with Billy Meyer, the Swiss farmer and fellow. And Ra sort of indicated, first of all, that they didn't want to talk about it, which means there's something going on there. And then they insinuated that it was a mixed contact, meaning positive and negative both responded to his calling. How much of either, I don't know. From who, I don't know. But again, you can determine that by the quality or the nature of the material. So if the calling, it's a question of the degree of polarity, the quality of polarity in the calling. If I'm simply calling for help, there's nothing negative in it, of course. But the calling may be asked in a mature way by one who's done a lot of work on themselves, or an immature way by somebody who hasn't done a lot of work. Work in wisdom, and work in development of love and kindness, loving kindness. And so how much the person has cleared their own blockages becomes the purity of the calling, in that they're clearly on the positive path. And so whatever they get, they'll be using for their own benefit in a holistic way.
So someone who is not polarized to either, fully service to others or fully service, I mean, in that spectrum, someone who's quite mixed would get a mixed response.
depending on, well, it depends then on the quality of that specific call, or the
Right.
nature of the call and the quality of the caller.
Right.
So a person who's not polarized is a person who hasn't done so much work on self-development. That's what it means to be not polarized, because the people who are polarized or clearly on a path of virtue or a path of vice have done work to get there.
Yeah.
They're there because they got there by effort. And the effort was unidirectional, meaning one direction or the other, positive or negative, unity or separation.
Yeah.
So that constitutes the nature of the caller. In terms of the quality of the calling, the person who hasn't done a lot of work is normally asking for release from pain or some material benefit. Like here in Taiwan, people day in and day out go to temples with incense and flowers and candles and offerings, perhaps, asking for benefit.
Yeah. Good exam results, usually.
What's that?
Good exam results.
Yeah, right. Help my son pass his college exam. Help my daughter get pregnant. Help my husband, harvest without backache. All sorts of things. Those callings are not particularly positive or negative. They're somewhat negative in that there's a selfishness, but it's not that heavy. So it's pretty much non-polarized. Then it really, again, depends on their karma. You see, the limit, so there are multiple limits or filters that determine the effect of calling. One is, of course, the nature of the caller, which is the degree to which they're polarized, positive or negative, which is the degree to which they've done inner work, which is the degree to which they've cleared lower chakra blockages. So that is the nature of the caller. And a very positive person, positive in the sense of having done a lot of work in love wisdom, will have a different responding crew, a different level of beings that are normally responsive.
Right.
While the person who's done little work has a more general response and responding community, the community of responders.
Would you say that a positive asking response is responded usually by, well, what I'm trying to say is it because looking at the cosmic evolutionary chain, would it be more natural for more higher beings of light to respond than higher beings of the dark side? Because as we know, in the fifth, the negatively oriented entities cease to give a shit. You know what I mean? Whereas in the five and the six light, they would still help.
Okay, let me refine that, I think. Ra mentioned that there are very few 5D negative members of Orion because they no longer find virtue in other selves. They no longer find any value in other selves. There's no longer any benefit perceived by them in the act of control of other selves, including planets and groups. So universal empire building is seen as delusion by them because they understand that there's no outer and inner split. And the purpose of working on the outer is only the transformation of the inner. The purpose of, in this case, service to self, upper 4D negative or 4D negative, and Illuminati, same. When they're so busy working on controlling society and individuals and devising strategies to keep that going, they're under the presumption that self and other are two. And they're under the presumption that they benefit by outer manipulation. The benefit that comes to them, which would be continued on the negative, their continuance on the negative path, is actually the effect that their working on others has on themselves. By their by their energy and effort towards clever scheming and clever use of their resources and manipulative stratagems and force application, they are transforming themselves. They are basically working from a maintained second, third, fourth chakra blockages to activated fifth and sixth. Wisdom, the negative use of wisdom. Wisdom can be used positive and negative. And also pure will, which is intelligent energy or sixth chakra activation, 6 and 7 linkage. So the true effect of any outer working, including service to other, by the way, is its effect on chakra transformation, the development of body, mind, spirit. So same for the positive. So we spend time, like here, I spend time talking, and that talking has some benefit to others.
Yeah.
The value of that, for me, is how it transforms my own body, mind, spirit complex. The reason that service to other is beneficial for those on the positive path is because it's the most efficient, one of the most efficient means to self-transformation. So the triad is study, meditation, and service. And the value of working with other in the positive way, including, making organizations that help the earth or take care of poverty or injustice or anything, or, taking care of old people in the hospital, or, help the trees or help the animals or whatever form of service to other there may be. The reason the person is there is because they're practicing self-transformation by the catalyst of relationship. Now, 5D, upper 5D or 5D negative realizes that there's no outer and inner. It's all one. It's all available by the inner. And so there's no need to pretend that that outer work has some special value, because it's all inner work. It's all inner work. And that's exactly the same in upper levels of the positive path, like meditation. I mean, the Buddha, his primary teaching was not go out and save people. His primary teaching was, this is the path to freedom, and this is what you'd need to do if you're going to follow it. And if you follow it, then go off and do your thing, meaning do it. And they did help the community by teaching, but that was much less important, actually, in terms of the purpose of the Buddha's speaking.
Do you think a Mahayana Buddhist would disagree with that?
Yes, of course, because of Mahayana came later, and they basically lowered the goalpost, which was appropriate given the fact that Arhat was considered too far. There are many, of course, and so that's very complicated. People call for, Jesus help me, and they get some help perhaps. It's not necessarily Jesus or the historical figure the person thinks they're calling. Same thing with Ra. Akhenaten was not calling for some sixth density group from Venus. He was actually calling for universal confirmation and guidance about his understanding of unity.
Right. It's like the man in the street and he gets mugged and then he cries out help. So, he's not fussy about help, is he?
Yeah. Well, we may be fussy about the help that I want to be. People are a little bit silly about this in terms of channeling. Some people say, I want to be channeling the angels. And then somebody says, oh, no, I want to channel the dolphins. And tonight we'll be doing channeling from the dolphins and the angels and the elephant kingdom. Wow. Oh, wow. But actually, really, people are like that. But actually, the messages from the other side are both general and specific. The general ones are known by any positive helper, like the law of karma. Why did this trouble come to me? Well, perhaps it's related to the trouble that you've been giving the people around you.
Mm.
Uh, but then deeper questions would have to be sourced from a higher level. So, why did I choose my parents? Well, you'd have to understand their psychology and your own psychology
Mm.
and your own point in soul evolution and what's blocked and what could be released, what blockage, what patterns of mind represent energy blockages,
Mm.
second, third chakra. What's the meaning of this illness? Well, in a way, it's an interesting thing. And this is what I see. The degree to which the person has developed their conscious mind understanding is
Mm.
related to the completeness or the thoroughness of the information presented.
Mm.
And so, if you can't conceive of it, you may not get that information.
Mm.
And so, it's very exacting, actually.
Mm.
The Confederation, Ra was talking about the use of mantras, and that using certain mantras are like dialing a certain telephone number.
Mm.
And this is true. The common mantras that we use, Om Mani Padme Hum or something like that
Mm.
from Tibetan Buddhism, are also working that way, but a little less specific. So black magic and occultists, they have their own mantras or ritual incantations, invocations to get certain spirits, which are negative.
Yep.
And those can be also very exact. Usually they are. And so what you get depends on who you are and how you call. Some calls, like those mantras, are extremely exact, so that if you know the precise pronunciation, which is not easy, and it's the intonation, and it's very specific.
Mm-hmm.
If you would know that, you would get some entity immediately. It would
Wow.
just appear in front of you.
So
And
it has to be exact. It's not even the intent that you when you say it.
well, it's first of all, I'm just talking about the use of very specific incantations to bring down spirits.
Mm-hmm.
This is nothing I would do, but uh, there's specificity, and then there's a.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the fourth interview with my guest and friend, Scott Mandelker. And today, we'd like to cover divination, actually. And kind of before the show, we were talking about the I Ching. Actually, we wanted to start the show with the I Ching. And I mean, in the last show, we talked about the tarot, but I thought it'd be good for us to talk a little bit about divination and seeking higher guidance from, higher sources, so to speak. So that's the topic for today's show. Scott, welcome.
Thank you for having me again.
So, Scott, what is divination?
Mm. Well, first of all, I'm not, an expert on the I Ching, and divination is not something that I've done a lot of, although I've used the I Ching pretty consistently up until a few years ago, from the year 1987 or so.
Mm-hmm.
So about 25 years and 20 plus years. Divination, is really seeking divine assistance, very
Mm.
simply. Often it's simplistic in that, should I do this or should I do that? Is it a yes or is it a no? Where's the water? Where's the oil? What, tell me my future, tell me my fortune. But then there's also seeking spiritual assistance,
Mm.
and for truly internal transformation, which you could use the I Ching for that, and you can use tarot, many other things. So it's the whole subject of interdimensional calling. And Ra said that what distinguishes them from the negative side, or the Orion group, is that the Confederation waits for the calling.
So
And
when you say calling, you mean it's basically communication, isn't it? From
calling,
different densities.
well, in this case, calling means seeking.
Okay.
It's asking.
Mm.
Calling in the sense of like we would call a friend, that call is a request.
Right.
And the request could be, pure or impure, meaning for the benefit of all or selfish. It
Mm.
can be positive or negative. Their negative entities call also. They
Mm.
call for spirits that can help them know the future to make money or gain power, or they call for power and
Mm.
ability. So it's the point about seek and you will find, uh, knock and it will be answered.
Mm.
And that's a law. And so there are higher beings watching us, with us, actually always, all the time.
Mm.
How much they can do very much more depends on us than them. Depends, I mean, what you're asking and what level that may be sourced from, meaning let's say I have a difficult situation in my life, and I want to know what's the goal in terms of learning and personal transformation. That's the ultimate cause of my having created this catalyst.
Mm.
Right? So everything. Uh, why do I have these parents? Let's say start at the beginning.
Mm.
Well, there are particular reasons why we chose parents, and that would be known fully by higher self, and that can be accessed by guides or higher dimensional helpers.